In this video, I'm going to show you how to place a serpentine bell tensioner on this Nissan Frontier. It's located on the front of your engine. Let's get started. Once you've located your battery on the passenger side of the engine bay, we'll disconnect the negative battery terminal, which is the one that does not have a cover. We'll use a 10mm socket, loosen this up, wiggle the terminal and pull it right off and set it aside to where it can't bounce back and make connection. Grab onto this air tube and turn it counterclockwise. If you're looking at it from the front, that's going to make this channel get to right about here. As soon as it stops, you can pull this back. That'll unlock it from the air filter housing. Pull it out of here. Now remove these two 10mm headed bolts and lift up this intake tubing and set it aside over the engine. Using a 14mm socket and ratchet or a serpentine belt tool or even a wrench, if that's what you have, push down on the tensioner, which is this right here. That's going to relieve pressure off of the belt. You can then slip it off of whatever pulley you can. The tensioner is the easiest, and then you can pull it off of something else so you can bring your tool up and remove the tool. And you can now reach in for the belt and pull it away. Right above the power steering pump, we have this ground with a 12mm socket. You can remove the bolt and remove the ground wire. This will ensure that we don't damage the wire in the process. This is a little bit hard to see, but right here on the engine side of the power steering pump, we have a 14mm headed bolt that we need to remove. That's going to be one of the two main bolts holding the power steering pump onto the engine, which we do have to move aside for this. All right, break that free. That one for me was very tight. Take that out. On the other side of the power steering pump on the bottom, another 14mm bolt. This one goes through a bracket. We need to remove that. Take this out. Now the power steering pump is able to move aside, not a lot, but enough for us to work here. It's time to unbolt the alternator, and one of the bolts that holds it on is up here underneath the power steering pump. 14mm in size. Break it free and remove it. There it is. Take that out. Below the alternator, you'll see 14mm mounting nut on a stud. We have to remove this as well. In my case, this is pulling out the whole stud, but that's okay. If anything, that is going to make it easier for us. If it doesn't and just the nut comes off, that's okay too. You'll just have to slide the alternator off as opposed to dropping it directly. All right, now you can grab onto the alternator, and we're probably going to need a pry bar to get it out of here. But whatever you do, just be very careful, very gentle, and pry it out of place. At this point, I'm going to go underneath the truck, use a pry bar, try to pry this alternator off of the engine block. Be very careful where you pry and how you pry. There's a little spacer down here that just fell off. You don't want to damage anything. You just want to slide it out of this bracket. There we go. Wires are still attached, so keep that in mind. It's not going to go very far, which is fine, but we can leave it right here and do the rest of our work. Now we can finally get to our serpentine belt tensioner. There are two 12mm headed bolts underneath it that we have to remove. There is another one on top, but we'll get these first. And that leaves us with this one right on top. Oh, there it goes. I'll get that last bolt out. All three are the same, by the way, so no need to keep them separate. And there's your tensioner. We'll take our new serpentine bell tensioner, slide it down into position. Fit it up against the engine. And we'll start in the first bolt just so it can be held on up here. Then we can pivot it around as needed to line up the others. All three bolts are started, so we'll bottom them out. All right, those are all snug. The torque on all three of these bolts is 16 foot-pounds. There's no way I can fit a torque wrench in here, so I'm going to do my best to tighten it up with my ratchet. Do the same whether you're using a wrench or a ratchet, unless you can fit a very small torque wrench in there. There we go. It's time to put the alternator back in. So we'll take it, and just as a tip, if you punch that little bushing outward that way, you'll have an easier time putting it back, because this actually, when you tighten it, comes up against the other side of this bracket here and pinches everything together. Now, if you remember, right here we had a stud that came off with a nut. I was able to just hold the center with some pliers and take the nut off of it. I'm using an E10 inverted torque socket to thread this back in. And using a ratchet, I'll just snug it up. There we go. I'm not too worried about how tight this is, because when I mount the nut on it and torque that, it's actually going to put pressure on the whole stud, and therefore automatically the other side will be properly tightened. Now, don't forget this spacer that for us came off of the back right here. So I'm going to slide that back on, and then the alternator goes over this. Now we'll grab onto the alternator, try to line that little hole up, the mounting hole, with the lower bolt or stud. There we go, just like that. And then we'll line it up top. This is where it helps if you punch that bushing in. Just wiggle it back and forth and push. Once it's lined up, or at least mostly, put this bolt in at the top. There it goes. Make sure it catches onto the threads and thread it in as far as you can. Let's re-secure this with the mounting nut on the bottom as well. Okay, so that's on, this is in. We'll bottom both of these out, and then we'll torque both of them to 47 foot-pounds. All right, those are both tight. Now grab the power steering pump and line it up on the bottom right here with that mounting hole. And then at the top, it needs to line up right here for the through bolt that goes in through this bracket and onto the other side. Doesn't matter which one you start first. For me, this one seems to line up a little bit better right now, so I will start it. With that started in its threads, I can pivot the power steering pump on that to line up the top bolt. I'm going to drive this bolt in a little bit further, get it closer to being bottomed out. Okay, I got this snugged up, and now let's snug up this bottom one. That one's snugged up. We'll torque the top bolt to 35 foot-pounds. And we'll torque the bottom bolt to 21 foot-pounds. All right, those are tight. At the top of the power steering pump, there's this bracket that we took the ground wire off of. Inspect it for corrosion. Mine's actually very clean, so I'm just going to put the bolt right back and tighten it up. This was a 12mm headed bolt. That's bottomed out and snug. Give it about 1/8 of a turn. That's plenty tight. On the screen, you'll see the belt routing diagram, and you'll follow this to put the belt back on correctly. I found it to be easiest if you start on the crank or the harmonic balancer, and then go up from there. Whether you go to the left or to the right, it doesn't matter, whatever works best for you. What you do want to make sure of, though, is that the belt is seated on all the pulleys in the center of them, especially on the ribbed ones. You want to make sure that every single rib is perfectly seated, otherwise the belt will jump off eventually. With the belt mostly on there, put your tool back on the tensioner, remove tension. That should give you the slack you need to slip the belt back on that last pulley. Okay, it's on there. Ensure that it is flat and mounted evenly on all the pulleys. I'm going to give it a quick spin because I can, just to ensure that things are seated, and they are. Everything looks good. All right, so I'm going to let go of this, and that belt is reinstalled. We'll get this intake reattached. And reattach the two 10mm headed bolts right here on the radiator support. We'll reconnect our negative battery terminal. Make sure there's no corrosion on there. Push this down all the way, and we'll tighten up the mounting nut. Just give it a quick snug. Don't go until it stops spinning. That would be too tight and it'll stretch this terminal out. This, because it can't spin, we know it's properly connected.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.